Yeah, I'm hoping
I'd like to call to order our governing board meeting this September 1st at 6:03 p.m. And to start us off, I'd like to call on Dr. DeMar to lead us in Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Let our roll call reflect that all governing board members are present this evening and all members of cabinet are also present. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's meeting and remind the audience of our request to address board cards that must be completed and submitted to the board secretary if they wish to speak to an agenda item. Board policy provides for 2 cards, white cards to be submitted in order to speak to an agenda item and blue cards to be submitted in order to speak during public comments. Policy also states there is a 5-minute time limit per speaker. Due to the open meeting law, board members are not allowed to address items that are not on the agenda. If you do not want to address the board but wish to give your comments in writing, you can do so on a goldenrod sheet, and all members will receive a copy. Approval of agenda.
With the governing board
Thank you. Any discussion? Been moved and seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Public comments. Any blue cards? No blue cards. Board and superintendent reports. We'll start with Dr. Lewis.
Well, good evening, everyone. What another exciting weekday. 12 hours we've had again. Some of our neighboring school districts did have to close down a few schools because of the incredible storm we had. But we had an awesome team addressing all the issues at dark 30 this morning, calling each other and scattering ourselves about. So let me just give you a brief update on what happened as a result of the storm. We had a 5 a.m. Inspection for damage and power issues, and really the only thing we could see that was problematic were the shade structure. Some shade structures at 4 of our sites were dismantled, and some trees were dismantled, and we were able to, make sure that the grounds were safe for student arrival. The buses assessed street blockage and determined that all were manageable with little disruption. There was one particular spot, I think it was 35th Avenue, where there was a full tree in the way, and we had some issues with how we were going to navigate around that with about 10 or 15 minute delay at worst for kids' arrivals. The city of Phoenix was amazingly on it. They had people all over helping with traffic. Technology, diagnosed router failures, and telephones that are not working, and quickly make sure we had communication, because the biggest problem we have there is that we have kids who didn't get to school because of a hiccup in transportation that we wanted to stay on top of. But the robo-dial was working, and by mid-morning, everything was just going smoothly. We were very pleased with the whole team's ability to work and navigate through that. We had a 2-hour delay on some principal and instructional leaders training so they could be at their buildings to really, manage the hiccup of the day. All children were accounted for. My second item is the superintendent's goals and reflections on the Saturday retreat that we had. From the Saturday retreat, I just want to remind the board that we wanted to simplify but have a solid continued focus from the exhibit that we worked on. We moved it and are moving it still. We're still working on it from 830 points to a 100-point system that I think everybody felt was more simplified, with 45 points being about student achievement, 35 points being about goals, and 20 points being about ISLIT standards. We also reduced it from a 26-page document to a 17-page document. We collapsed sections 3 and 4 into one more simplified version, reducing 32 indicators into 6 overall rankings of each ISLIT standard for those 20 points. We also are currently updating the student achievement piece to make sure that we're matching the state's capacity to give us data, as well as our pre and post data. as well as the student and parent surveys, and to be sure that the Azella reclassifications are properly calibrated. So I'll have a draft for you next week in our discussions. And then the third thing I wanted to bring up is that we are very excited that most board members are going to be able to join us for site visits most of the day on Wednesday and all day on Thursday. So thank you for signing up. And if you want to take a look at your schedule, I have it here for you. But we'll be at Biltmore, Kennedy, and Mackin on Wednesday between 8 and 1. And we'll be at Papago, both the early childhood area and the Jeanette School, Excellency in Creighton from 8 to 2:45. So I look forward to seeing all of you for those walkthroughs and anybody else who can join us. That's it.
Thank you. Board reports. Okay, I do. I have a couple items. First and foremost, I wanted to read a letter that was sent to us by Congresswoman Kirsten Sinema. We had the honor of having her office represented at our grand reopening of Monte Vista, and she also shared a letter, so I wanted to share that here. Tonight we gather to celebrate the reopening of Monte Vista Elementary School and recognize the important role the school has played in the community for over 57 years. In September 1948, Monte Vista consisted of 95 students, 4 teachers, and 4 classrooms. And by the end of that first year, there were over 300 students enrolled. Monte Vista rapidly expanded during the following years in order to meet the need of post-World War II baby booming families of the area. On August 10, 2015, Monte Vista welcomed over 700 students to a brand new state-of-the-art campus, thanks to the efforts of everyone gathered today, who, like Monte Vista's early pioneers, responded to the needs of the families it serves. I have tremendous respect for the Monte Vista. I have tremendous respect for the role that Monte Vista plays in the lives of every student. And as Monte Vista is a brand new era, I encourage Principal Michael Madison, our Creighton Superintendent, Dr. Donald Lewis, and the Creighton Board to reach out to me should you need any assistance in the days ahead. Arizona's future lies in the hearts and minds of our young people, and I value the work Monte Vista teachers do to educate, support, and inspire their students, the future leaders and innovators of Arizona and our great United States. Congratulations to Principal Madison, the students, families, and faculty of Monte Vista. It's my honor to be your voice in Congress, and I wish you all a very productive and memorable 2015-2016 school year in your beautiful new campus. Sincerely, Kirsten Sinema. My next item is for the board. You might have seen the correspondence from the School Board Association with their HOPE campaign. These are to recognize heroes of public education. I wanted to encourage all of you to make submissions. I think it's as easy as writing a one-sentence description of who our public heroes are in our own community. And I'd love to bring that back to our board and invite our honorees to receive recognition. If you need a link, we'll make sure to send that to you. The third item is, it's interesting. So I just wanted to acknowledge something. We've all been talking about increasing our efforts to reach out to our community, and that's been, I think it's been heard. I definitely know our staff is doing that. I've heard from some parents who feel, number one, like they're getting too much and not sure how to decipher all of it, which is a good problem to have. I've heard from other members of our community who I respect who feel very invested because they've been engaged in panels for new hires and things like that. So I know our efforts are not just to do the work, but to do it effectively. So I look forward to hearing about that. And that concludes my report. All right, let's move on. Our next agenda item is the approval of consent agenda.
Move the governing board to consent agenda items A through I in accordance with policy.
Any discussion on consent? Great, it's moved in second, and all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Our next item is under Educational Services. Dr. Lewis, we look forward to hearing about enrollment and staffing update.
Well, as you know, Mr. President, members of the board, and our audience, we always live and die by our numbers, and we're watching very closely where we are. The short story is we're higher than we were at this very date last year. The other short story is we're not quite where we thought we might be for projections, but our projections were on 100th day. So we're going to share some really interesting details that the team has worked on, and I'm going to ask Tommy Neal to introduce it.
Good evening, President Zaragoza, members of the board and the cabinet. Our purpose this evening is to provide for you some information regarding our enrollment and our staffing. We're going to begin this evening with just a picture of the district enrollment. And if you look somewhere around your computer, you'll find this. And we couldn't not show it to you. It was such a great picture of enrollment in the district for 65 years of enrollment. And what happened to the enrollment through that 65 years. So we just could not show it to you. It was a great picture. Then we're going to continue the presentation with some enrollment trends, both at the district level and at the site level. And then after we share for enrollment and staffing, we want to talk to you some more about some next steps and some of the challenges that we might face in staffing and enrollment. Our presenters this evening, Mr. Ed Stoltz and Dr. Susan Miguel.
Thank you, Tommy. Governing Board President, Governing Board members, executive staff, thank you for letting us do this presentation this evening. To start off, over the last 10 years, this is our enrollment at the Creighton School District. Starting at 8308 in 2005-06, the current 100th day, which would have been January 16, 2015, was 6501. We have some enrollment trends by site, and some of these are a little odd. Excellencia, Kennedy, Loma Linda, and Mackins. I put these four together because these are four schools that seem to be still declining in enrollment since we started going down in 2003. When we start looking at decreasing enrollment and look at an analysis of that for those four sites, we've had an awful lot of apartment revitalization in the area. Phoenix Children's Hospital actually partnered with some contractors and some of the apartment complexes to actually revitalize apartment complexes, identifying or targeting staff to their new hospital as they rebuilt it several years ago. So that had an impact in the Mackin, Loma Linda, and Excellencia areas. Mobility of international students. The city of Phoenix brings in refugee students, and they have agreements with specific apartment complexes to bring numbers of refugees into those areas. And we have a couple of apartment complexes that are getting ready to revitalize or in the process of revitalizing and are no longer accepting refugee students. That has a direct impact on Mary C. Kennedy.
And when you say revitalize, do you mean remodel and that kind of stuff and have a more higher rent cost? And
yes, they're remodeling their apartment
persons with families can't afford it anymore, so they're leaving.
Yes.
More or less. Okay. Thank you.
Charter, we have had some impact of charter schools and then competing districts. Creighton School and Gateway School tend to be our maintaining schools. They've been fairly steady over the last 5 to 6 years. Then we have 3 schools that are increasing in enrollment. Now, one of those looks a little bit odd, which is Monte Vista. And the reason I say that is because, again, these are 100-day numbers. So this is January 16, 2015. When you look at our current number, that number is very much exceeded by what has happened just in the last 2-3 weeks. Increasing school analysis. It's obvious that programs make a difference, as well as marketing and PR of those programs. And it's becoming very obvious with both Patrico and Loma 2015, day 15 compared to 2016, day 15. Day 15 was Friday. You see Biltmore went from 480 to 543. Creighton is 770 to 719. And you can see the numbers across there, and you can see that Monte Vista is already up to 822 students. Remember, they were in the low 700s during that 100th day. That's why we're saying it's an increasing school. Papago is at 956 compared to 979, but again, that's still very close to their capacity. (2016) day 1 to day 15 change. As you can see, we're still having large changes between the first day, and as of Friday, we had a 272 student difference. Normally, our largest number is around the 40th day, so we will continue to grow until approximately the 40th day. We utilize the 100-day numbers January 16th to do our projections. And as you can see, the projection levels, the 2016 enrollment, and then the projections versus enrollment. And as of Friday, we were only 96 kids off the projection that we made off of the January 16th number. But as you can see, each school is a little bit different. Creighton being 89 students under, Kennedy being 22 students under, Loma Linda being 65 under. Papago is under 24, but Papago tends to grow fairly quickly between now and the 40th day. Are there any questions on the enrollment numbers? And for staffing will be Dr. Susan Linda.
So here on this chart, you can see each school and the number of people that are staffed there. That's the first line that comes with a head count, and the sum of FTE. FTE stands for full-time equivalency. So sometimes, like if you look at the first school, Biltmore Preparatory Academy, there's 37 teachers there, yet their full-time equivalency is at almost 32. That's because some of the teachers are half-time, and if you look down the line, the FTEs are 33.3. Our band teachers are split among 3 schools. So that just gives you a little sight of comparison. So we watch our numbers very, very closely from day 1 to day 10 and beyond. Mr. Stolz showed you that we were 96 off of our actual enrollment at this time, and that's if children came in nice little packages of 30 or 27, that would be about 3.5 teachers off. So at this point is the 2 positions, not bodies. We haven't this year, knock on wood, we haven't had to involuntarily transfer anybody. The 2 positions have been transferred to high need schools where they're kindergartens, which is a really good thing to see their kindergartens growing. And then 4 positions that were allocated were closed at one point or another. When schools saw that their kindergarten numbers early in the summer weren't going to make it, so we just kind of held on that and didn't hire for those positions. Other positions were filled by contract guest teachers who aspired to be interns or teachers, and so they're still on our guest teacher list. So we did not have to reduce in force by anyone. Yes.
With the FTEs positions, we're not put into a number that if we don't fill, we'll lose them or anything like that. Correct? If the projection is lower than what happens, we can open a position.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good question. Thank you. So staffing is not a perfect science, although we try to do it so. And you can see that some of the challenges come along with school size. Our larger schools run much more efficiently than our smaller schools, and most of that is due to programmatic effect. So if you have an ELD, self-contained model, which is required by the state for 4 hours, now we're hearing talk about 2, that will offset a mainstream classroom in a very small school where there's only 2 teachers per grade level, that causes you to combine and do multi-age classrooms. So there are some challenges there. The same thing goes with a foreign language immersion program where it's very strict about the type of program that's being delivered to the students. Additionally, our special areas are not formula staffed. So by number of minutes and number of classrooms, they are staffed with 1 PE, 1 art, 1 music, a third of bands throughout, and technology throughout the district. And then special education, we look to try to formula staff that, the IEPs and different areas create some challenges. And then our biggest challenge this year was really trying to keep up with the teacher shortage and the crisis and be very proactive with what we do. So our next steps in our staffing area is we're going to continue to monitor enrollment and through Labor Day and beyond. Labor Day is a key day for us. We have some kinders that are growing quickly and we're hoping that they'll come back after Labor Day. We're looking forward to reviewing some staffing formulas. We have some fresh perspectives that have been brought to us, and that's going to be something that we're going to look at. Review programmatic requirements, and I've been in a lot of conversation with Grand Canyon University and ASU University about how do we grow our own teachers. I know at least 5 Loma Linda students who are currently working within the district, 3 of which very much so want to be teachers, and how do we get those, I call them kiddos, but they're young adults now, to get in the pipeline, and how do we support them? Any questions or discussion?
I mean, I'm assuming Labor Day is just because
It's an East Coast thing.
Yeah,
We never
yeah.
started school till after
Right.
Labor Day.
Yeah, it's so weird, but yeah, I mean, I get it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lugo. All right, our next agenda item is personnel, and first is the approval of Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Lewis.
It is with great pleasure, again, after a highly competitive process, that over 30 candidates sought to come to Creighton District. And it was with great scrutiny that we narrowed the pool to, about, I think it was 6 or 7. And then the panel, which included community members and a cross-section of stakeholders from around the district, interviewed candidates using a simulation in basket, as well as some very tough and authentic questions about what the district's really going through and directions this person might help us take. And after a really thoughtful finalist process, I am pleased to bring you Dr. Sue Peterson in hopes that you will approve her recommendation to be the Chief Academic Officer and a new member of the executive team.
Questions? She is here.
Dr. Peterson, would you please stand? I know you're with your family. Your whole family can stand with you. Yes, you may. You get the whole family. They work on Saturdays and Sundays. You didn't know that's why she really brought you.
Any possibility to move it up effective sooner?
Do you want to start at night?
Sure.
Okay, pull up a chair.
Great. Comments, questions?
I just want to say that I have worked with her before, a couple of years ago, with an artist residency at a school that she was principal at, and it was a delight to work with her. And we felt like, my partner and I, who did the dance and I did the art, we just had a great experience there. So, yeah.
I just had one short interaction with Dr. Peterson and found it favorable. I appreciate the comprehensive effort to bring us not only just a new role, but a new leader to our district. So I am very enthusiastic about this. And with that, I'll move the governing board to Dr. Susan J. Peterson for the position of Chief Academic Officer effective 9/14/2015.
I second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Unanimous decision. Welcome.
You made a comment about moving it up earlier. She has agreed to attend the law conference with us, so you'll get a chance to get to know her there. And she'll be easing in. She's already been informed of a few issues, so I was trying to get her input, but I said, pending board approval, let me know your opinion. So she's going to hit the ground running and wants to, like with any great professional, end with solid closure where she currently is. So I applaud her for that, the integrity of that closure.
I just want to share how very excited I am to come to the board. Had a delightful day at the board meeting when I got to spend a Saturday here as you guys were doing your study session. And every interaction that I've had with anybody that I've met has been just absolutely delightful. I just feel very humbled about it. Thank you very much.
I like you already because you referred to a board meeting as delightful.
Awesome. We get to add more expertise, hopefully. Our next agenda item is the approval of the Director of Finance.
Mr. President, members of the board, you know, we don't start people off easy here, but Jay Mann has already been a part of the interview process, not make his first hire. This is officially day 2 for him. So day 1 yesterday, he was working on what again was a competitive process, top candidates, and I'll let Mr. Mann share with you the process and his recommendation.
We actually had sort of a multi-tiered process for this with a fairly large panel interview with over 11 panel members that I think there was a reference earlier to community members being involved. So it was really a comprehensive group. We had started with 34 candidates for the position, and we had narrowed that field down to 6, and then some other research and components came into play. We had a candidate who took a position someplace else, and some other eliminating factors. And we did interviews with 3 candidates, and we were down to 2 finalists, and it was incredibly competitive, and that's why we were doing interviews again tomorrow to do finalist interviews in order to be able to get it narrowed down to who. I'm sorry, yesterday Monday. They all blended together. So anyway, I'm not sure when I've left and when I've arrived, but I'm here now. So and ultimately, we are recommending Sharon Grossi, who will be coming to us from Sanders School District. She has a wealth of experience in schools, in finance, in a variety of areas. She's done everything from Title I, which is important to us, to being Director of Finance. She's worked in just a really broad range and brings us a wealth of experience and just kind of continues to grow that team that we're building to have a lot of expertise and be able to move forward quickly.
Great. Thank you. Questions?
I'm just curious where Sanders is.
Well, Sanders is actually on the Arizona-New Mexico border and sort of the northeastern portion of the state, and it's actually on reservation land, and that is why she's not with us this evening, because she actually left us after a finalist interview, drove 4.5 hours to work, went to her board meeting last night at 5, so trying to get her back here tonight would have been a very challenging thing. So, but she is from Phoenix previously. She's been working up there the last few years. I'm just very excited to have an opportunity, should the board approve her recommendation, to be able to come back to Phoenix and be part of the Creighton School District.
Okay.
Move the governing board for Sharon Grassi, position of Director of Finance, to be effective. To be announced. To be effective. To be finance effective to be announced.
Second.
Great. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Unanimous decision.
Congratulations, Jan, your first hire.
Yeah.
And thanks for handling a crisis at the storm first thing in the morning.
That's all.
Second day.
Great. Our next item is district principal and teacher evaluation classifications. Dr. Lewis?
I would like to update you on what's going on with our evaluation classification shifts and keep you informed of the way in which our new systems are working. Dr. Lewis will be sharing that with you.
Good evening, governing board members and Dr. Lewis and Cabinet. Thank you for having me here this evening. This is our annual review of the performance classifications of our teachers and our principals. It's required once a year for the board to discuss that. Just a very brief history of the development of our evaluation system. In 2010, an advisory committee was established. We had over 64 teachers and administrators come together to begin the process of adding student achievement data and individual classroom data between 33 and 55% to our traditional observation tool that was built solely on observation.
We're having a little
Time.
share technical
Yeah.
difficulty.
Okay.
She's okay. Her elbows are up here.
We wanted you to know how it feels to be student. Okay. So in the fall of 2013 came the first adoption, and we did have an outside facilitator vet and look at our calculations, give us feedback. We also had the attorney review that and making continuous refinements with the evaluation steering committee that meets at least once per quarter, if not more. Now, in the spring of 2014, you'll know that we had brought a couple of reviews to the board for approval, and then there were revisions made along the way. The final adoption with the new revisions began in the spring of 2015. So this year would be our first year with the new revisions. So it's very important to note that we didn't have any changes last year from the year before. Okay, so as I alluded to before, it's part of the Arizona Revised Statute that the governing board shall discuss at a public meeting once a year the aggregate of its teachers and principals' performance classifications. I'd like to remind you that the performance classifications were adopted by the Arizona Department of Education, and you can see that we have 4 categories. We have highly effective. I'll give you a moment just to look at keywords there. Consistently exceeds expectations. Effective. Consistently meets expectations. Developing, which really requires a change in its performance, and that's also the area for learning and growing. And then an ineffective, which consistently fails to meet expectations and requires change in performance. And an ineffective will generate a performance improvement plan, which allows the teacher 45 instructional days in which to improve their performance.
Dr. Leo, on that slide, those definitions, I think what's missing for me is whose expectations? Are these the state boards or are these locally determined by the governing board?
They are the state board's expectations. That they were adopted by the state board and we are in our evaluation.
So like a highly effective teacher, meaning they're defining all the expectations, or they just made these categories for us?
They made the categories for us.
Okay.
Our expectations are in the calculation on how those categories come out.
It's up to the district to adopt the style in which it's applied. So we've adopted the Charlotte Danielson model, and we're using the state's definitions and the state's words, but we calibrate it to our standards locally.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, that's what I wanted to hear.
And one thing to note, it's really important, we adopted this Danielson model for this current year. You're looking at the aggregate data from last year with no changes to our tool.
Well, that's good to point out.
I do just have a question in that. Maybe it's semantics, but you have a first year teacher. developing seems to be not quite there, not quite good enough. So if somebody is a first-year teacher and they're doing a halfway decent job, their performance-wise, they wouldn't be developing, they'd be effective what they need.
Well,
I guess it's semantics, developing
So-
the meanings or learning that job.
and the statute really does try to help that effect, because you can be developing if you're a new teacher or you change grade levels for 2 years in a row. We really do want our teachers to know that the purpose of the evaluation system is to help people grow and get better, and especially those new teachers coming in. Although sometimes it's hard because we hired the cream of the crop, and they're used to getting straight A's right out of ASU. So there's a little dissonance that occurs. It's very, very perceptive. So here you'll see our aggregate rating of our teachers. And I'll give you a moment to look at that. And then here you will see the aggregate rating of the principals. The top one should say effective and highly effective. The top one. Okay, so our recommendations here are to ensure that we continue to collaborate with our teachers and our principals, and minimum on a quarterly, but right now we've done a lot, because remember, this year we now have a new evaluation observation system. We've aligned with the Danielson 2013, which is much more rigorous to get to that level 4. There was training today for our administrators. All of our administrators have passed 20 hours of professional development, and then they had to take a rigorous assessment on the Danielson observation tool. We've also reviewed the alignment of the student achievement calculations. So for example, AZ Merit is on hold right now, so those are some things that we're working on. With our principals, we're doing all that training, as well as principals will be working with the superintendent, Dr. Lewis, to determine individual and site-based goals, and looking at the ISWIC rubric as well. Any questions?
So I did have the good fortune of seeing a teacher get feedback with the new model, and I agree it's much more rigorous. I liked how much ownership the teacher exhibited, and I had idea generation on how to move to the next level. I'm curious with when raising expectations, raising standards, we should expect a dip in the performance. You mentioned that. I'm curious with your calculations and projections, what you expect that to look like. I don't want the board to freak out in the spring when we get updates and it shows that our teachers are, some might be developing, some might be effective, they might be not highly effective because our expectations changed. Doesn't mean they're not doing good work. Can you give us a preview of what to expect?
Yeah, we will be going through some learning and growing. I don't want to say pains, because I have a feeling that our teachers will feel much better about the rich conversation. What the area when it becomes very difficult is when it's tied to pay or pay for performance. So I think we need to look very carefully on as we're in a learning and growing year, and we have a third of our population of teachers that are in their first 2 years. How do we mitigate for that? How do we say we're all in this together, we're going to hold hands and jump in and work on this together without it feeling punitive?
I mean, without it feeling punitive, I know we've had these conversations for 6 years, Dr. Lugo. The purpose for the evaluation tool is to improve our practice.
Correct.
That's what we're using it for, right?
Right.
Are there other uses that are we using it for? Hiring, firing, sorting?
That is, so we're, how do I say that? That is also a purpose. And it's a purpose for very few. There are some people that do not belong in the classroom, or this district may not be a good fit. That happens. people have time and opportunity to improve. I know our leaders are not quick to put somebody in a corner in a box saying, you can't learn and grow. They're obligated to report to my office, show me the improvement plan. They get 45 days in which to improve instruction, and then we work there. They have a whole instructional leadership team that will reach out to them, instructional coaches, the student achievement teachers, as well as any teacher leader on that campus is there to support them, but most of all, it's the principal that's there for them.
Okay, so I have another question. And it's more on the, we talked about these classifications, but I know in the past with the old model, we looked at 35% of the evaluation was classroom-specific data. There was an effort to honor the culture that the school pulls together to promote student learning. I think that's important. I think that was worth 10%. That gave 45% for student learning, which we mirrored the superintendent. What does that look like for this? Does that change?
The percentages remain the same. So the adoption that we're under right now still has the 35% on individual classroom data, 10% for school aggregate data, and then the 55% for the observational data.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Leo.
My pleasure.
Our next item is under general, which is the discussion to suspend current policy HB, which is meet and confer. This is kind of a package because there's also to give first reading to policy change. So I want to first focus our attention just on suspension, or possible suspension, I should say, before we talk about, or before we look at the first read and move on to that agenda item. And this was Ms. McSheffrey's agenda item, so I wanted to have you frame this conversation for us.
Okay. And I am going to refer to the
Yeah.
previous.
I might be direct, if that's
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
Gentle.
The reason that I brought it up, well, there's several reasons. The most troubling part of the new policy for me is the attorney's advice that we received since I've been on the board, which was part of the executive session where we all received the information. Basically, it generally said that this policy would cause problems, and I can see that it already has. Because it came to an impasse and couldn't reach a compromise on the professional agreement, the policy is now technically defunct. And I don't see that problem changing if we continue to see things like special ed recommendations on there. I have a child with an IEP, so the last several years I've learned how difficult it is to advocate for kids with special ed, so that makes me particularly nervous to see that on there. I'm not saying anything nefarious is going on with it right now, but I think if we do that, it sets a bad precedent going forward. There's also things about capital budget on there, things about adding specific bus routes, the length of the school day continually comes up. And I feel like these items need to be looked at as part of the bigger picture. These are, from what I understand from looking at the old policy, these things are all out of the normal scope of meet and confer, which is already 85% of our budget. It's supposed to be salaries and benefits based on the ASBA endorsed and legally defendable meet and confer scope. And so that's what I would like to go back to. That's what's on this agenda. And it's also that ASBA endorsed is supported by our attorney and ASBA's attorneys.
So before we look at the new old one, the question before us is, should the board suspend the current policy?
So
yeah.
I think because it's defunct, because we voted no, that's why I would like to suspend it. I have a couple other reasons. I'm sorry, it's a little lengthy, but I think that anything beyond the scope of salary and benefits, again, needs to be part of a bigger picture, an operational system discussion that the superintendent will lead by creating advisory committees and operational task forces.
This way, we're not holding up salary and benefits discussions because we're worried about items like special ed and other seemingly random budget items that need to be described and defended in length. And that's already been done for us, but I can't even explain that to someone at this point. If someone asks me why is that special ed stuff on there, I can't defend it myself. Additionally, the way I understand this policy, it's a partnership / agreement between the governing board and it's stated several different ways throughout the policy, but governing board and district employees and CEA, and it has the potential to bypass our relationship with the superintendent. Also, the way I'm interpreting it, it's asking us potentially to delegate, relinquish, or surrender our authority to an unelected, unaccountable committee, which at worst could be found illegal, again, based on what our attorney has stated. But at best, it's not what I understand our role is to be, which is to direct the superintendent to create this team and bring back her recommendations on salary and benefits. Anything else is out of scope and could tie her hands as well as our own, as well as future boards. It's way too broad, and I think it's unclear to everybody. And finally, I mean, this is not an attempt to get rid of this, to get rid of a meet and confer policy in general. I want and value a policy of some sort, and I want to hear teachers' voices and staff voices. I want them all to have a say in salary and benefits, as well as these other components, you know, complaints, problems, grievances, but I think it needs to go through the proper venues and not feel random. And I think it needs also, through what we're told, is it needs to be through the superintendent, and we're required to hold her accountable for those systems, and no one else.
Thank you. Love to hear other opinions from the board. I know we have one community member who'd like to address us, and then we'll get a recommendation from the superintendent on how to proceed, and we'll take a vote. So any other board members would like to share their thoughts on suspending this policy or not suspending this policy, or just questions?
Well, it's kind of funny because when I spoke with another board member who has a very solid meet and confer policy as well as a professional agreement within their education organization within their district. You know, I just mentioned something about this is the vote that we're going to have tonight, and she said, "What's wrong with your meet and confer?" And I said, you know, as far as I can tell, and this is a letter back from January 21st, 2014, before we actually made any of the changes. These were all recommendations that came right from our legal counsel. And we ended up actually, as a board, going through and making all of her changes. And so I said, as far as I can tell, there's nothing wrong with the way that we've written it. I think that maybe some people might, and I don't mean to put words in anybody's mouth, but I just maybe the idea of professional agreement makes people uncomfortable, because a lot of people do use that term, you know, keeps your hands tied, or it could tie the hands of future boards. And she expressed how glad she was that in her district she had such a strong meet and confer policy with such a strong professional agreement that's built upon every single year. So, you know, I feel like we've kind of gone over the recommendations that Ms. McClendon made, that's her name, and we actually have already made those changes. You know, I know that she expressed some of the same types of concern, but I didn't recall it all being, you know, this is what's going to happen. It could, but probably not in your cover, was the conversation that I remember. And again, you know, there's a letter from January 21st, 2014, where she said, here's the changes that I would make if I were you as a board. And then back on February 18th, 2014, we unanimously voted for this document as a board.
Yes, I am not for suspending it either. I think conditions of work are very important for employees to be able to also discuss salary and benefits, yes, but conditions of work also. I feel like employees need a place where they feel that they can be heard. So tying their hands to not having a meet and confer or having a more limited meet and confer, I don't think is a good idea at all. And the committee of Meet and Confer is made up of, how many people here? 12? 10. Okay, so it's made up of teachers and staff and administration, community members, I believe. And my belief also is that it's a suggestion. It's not something that takes away the board's rights to vote on things or anything like that. So and also being, on the board almost 4 years now, I do remember what Jean was talking about when we voted on it before, and we had discussions with our lawyer about it, and that it was perfectly fine. And when it finally got voted it, I remember our previous board president being very happy that this was an accomplishment she had helped bring forward to make it maybe a more equitable district for employees to work. So that's my feelings on it. Thank you.
So I'll share that. I don't actually think their board members are too far from what we're advocating for, but what I witnessed happen this spring was we didn't have clear policy and interpretation of the process. So some people thought Meet Confer was something different. We weren't on the same page. And then there were comments made to the governing board that our decision doesn't matter, that if 10 people make these recommendations, we should just adopt them, which concerned me because that's not my understanding of our role. So I agree with you, Amy, but I also want to make sure that it is important to me that we do have clear, I call them rules of engagement, so that folks know how to engage. And I think what's happened with what we have here, we don't have these clear rules of engagement. Not everyone is clear on their role. And so some comments have been made, such as parents shouldn't have a say in what we're going to do with our schools. That should all go through Meet and Confer, and then Meet and Confer is just for employees. And that's not anything we ever said, but it's just been misinterpreted and spun. And then when we didn't have, because our policy is written like a regulation, it's not a policy, it's a policy disguised as a regulation. We don't have an exhibit on what a professional agreement might mean. And then I also felt that in our work to make decisions with this district, we've been authorized by the Arizona state statutes as a governing board to hire and direct the superintendent and evaluate the superintendent. And what we had before was a policy that honored that. I thought it was limited, and clearly there was a reason that the board changed it. But what we have now is it's the way it's written, it supersedes the superintendent, and it forces a conversation and an exclusive relationship between the governing board and the teachers association, which is fine. If we all agree that we want to suspend that and work around the superintendent, I know what happens in other districts where this is their style. You have a professional agreement with your certified teachers, you have another professional agreement with your classified, a third professional agreement emerges with your administrative team, and then there are more folks that continue to emerge that want to organize, which is, I agree with organized labor, but it makes the work more challenging. And I think if we are trying to address the problem that we have, we could not get an agreement with Meet and Confer in the spring. We tried to negotiate some sort of a compromise and a bridge, and we weren't able to do that because there were unclear rules of engagement. And I would think it'd be unfair to start the process again because our policy has deadlines and start dates when we already have recognized this policy doesn't work for this governance team. We have to clarify a number of things. I'm not sure exactly what the fix is, but those are some of my general thoughts on our roles. Any responses, or should we bring up our web card?
The only other thing I forgot to mention is that we do have a new superintendent who, from what I've heard from her when I've had my one-on-ones, is that she very much wants to hear from she wants to fix problems that are brought to her. So I'm really optimistic that problems will be addressed. And if they're not addressed, I mean, we haven't been able to work together long enough to deal with those things, but I'm very optimistic that things will be addressed. So I'd like to give our new superintendent the benefit of the doubt, and give her some time to accomplish these things.
So does anyone board members feel we don't, as a governing board, value our employees' point of view, and we want to create more opportunities to give us a point of view?
I feel like there is a belief in this district that there is a very vast gap between what the board does and what they say sometimes, and what happens day to day in the classroom, or how teachers are feeling in the current climate. I definitely feel that way in my discussions with colleagues, former colleagues, and new people that I've met since being on the board.
Yeah, having been a teacher in the district also, I feel that that's, that I ditto what you said.
And so there's only one entry point, one opportunity to share points of view, and that's through the confer.
Well, that if we can meet and confer, then there's nothing. You know, it's human resource, but in any business or organization, human resource, and we have a wonderful human resource director, but it's not always, you know, what people feel fair. Sometimes people feel like they're being mistreated.
At this point, I'd like to call up Mr. James Diaz for his point of view.
Okay, good evening, Governing Board and Cabinet. My name is James Diaz, and I'm the President of the Creighton Education Association. I want to talk tonight about the statement on the Governing Board website and its relationship to this agenda item. It reads as follows. The Creighton School District Governing Board's vision for 2015-16 is to lead the district by actively engaging our diverse stakeholders and working together to create the schools we want. I was happy to see the Governing Board develop this statement because it means so much to me. I believe we will create the schools we want by working together, using the concepts and practices of inclusive decision-making, authentic input, and meaningful participation to reach our shared mission. This is why the implications of this agenda item worry me greatly. Several years ago, the Meet and Confer process had a reputation of being a rubber stamp and/or whine and complain committee. Some people felt that decisions were made in closed-door meetings ahead of time, and the package came to the Meet and Confer process with a take it as a whole or eat it mentality. Even if meaningful items were approved by the committee, it did not change its reputation because the agreements did not come to the Governing Board in the form of a professional agreement and were not published somewhere in a visible location. The consequence was that some items were violated by administrators and staff without even realizing their very honest mistake. Because the previous board felt like you about authentic input, meaningful participation, and inclusive decision-making, they decided unanimously to revise the Meet and Confer policy in consultation with the CSD lawyer. Over the last 2 to 3 years, administration has made significant improvements with authentic input and inclusive decision-making. This speech is not a criticism of administration. The Staff Retention Committee, the TEL Survey, Strategic Planning Committee, the Health Reform Committee, and many others. All of these things were used as data in Meet and Confer in an interest-based process to help create the schools we want. Have we made mistakes along the way? Yes. Did we maybe take things in a direction that resulted in an outcome we did not expect? Possibly. One of my biggest regrets is that we neglected to talk more about our hardworking and incidentally the group of employees with one of the least amount of turnovers, classified staff. Because we did not have a TEL survey for classified staff, we did not realize how wide-reaching the desire was for classified staff to be compensated for the professional development they have acquired over the years. We did not realize how hard it has been for custodians and others to be cut to the bare minimum and still be furloughed. And because there is no classified TEL survey to collect data, who knows what other authentic input we have missed. This weighs on me greatly. There are districts in Arizona that have either eliminated and or severely diminished their policy on meet and confer and are dealing with the consequences. Gilbert comes to mind. There are also districts that have a strong history of collaboration, focus on student achievement, and an authentic, meaningful meet and confer process. Phoenix Union, Paradise Valley, and Tempe Elementary come to mind. It is my belief that what we really need is guidance from the governing board. We have just adopted this policy. We have conversations and meet and confer and come to consensus on items using a wide variety of data and communication from diverse stakeholders. However, we also know that in the end, this package belongs to you, the board, and you must feel comfortable supporting it. If we have brought items to the board like the issue of time and others, it is because we as a team recognized it as authentic input from diverse stakeholders and came to consensus on a possible solution. But again, in the end, the board must feel comfortable supporting it. These circumstances are not the result of a defect in the policy itself. In my opinion, we simply need guidance from the board on how to proceed with an agreement you can support. We've just taken a step forward with meaningful participation and inclusive decision. Let's not take 2 steps backwards towards mistrust and lack of transparency. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to, if you don't mind, I went back and forth about what I was going to say exactly because it's long. And I'm just going to go ahead and go with one version, so, you know, just for a second. I've been with CSD either as a teacher or board member since 2008. Every teacher has a rough first year, but back then, the state began cracking down on English only law in all of my classes. Went from only 7th grade blocks of 1.5 hours to having all non-ELD 7th and 8th graders 55 minutes per period, about a month into my first year of teaching. My 8th graders had to leave their beloved teacher behind, and were stuck with some newbie who knew nothing about them. And you can just ask Jennifer Court. I cried a lot every single day. It was a hard job. But through her encouragement, with the staff still adhering to the pedagogical philosophies of Kathy Teagarden, things like thematic units and project-based learning, PBIS, before anybody really knew how to name for it, I kept my chin up. I remembered how my TFA mentor, Big Diaz, taught me how to design a unit, and I worked my butt off during that winter break of 2008. I put together some of the most beautiful, relevant, and comprehensive units and couldn't wait to get back to work, only to find out at our very first staff meeting back that we would not be teaching anything in units. That we were a failing district, which we knew since August, but all of a sudden, we were frantically trying to fix that. We started to work with an education reform consulting group, and we essentially had to teach the test. When I expressed concern to an administrator about the hours I had put into preparing units and acquiring novels to teach and foster the love of reading with my students, I was told, and this is a quote, "These kids need to be exposed to Ames-like excerpts in order to bring up test scores." I was also told we would focus on only one standard at a time and give the kids weekly common formative assessments, also known as CFAs, and to focus on the bubble kids, those who could just pass the test so we could get that meets on Ames. Needless to say, I was devastated. This is not what I imagined teaching would look like. And my albeit young but very big teaching heart said this was wrong. I asked a master teacher at my school how this could be happening. How was this good advice? When everything I'd been taught or read through my own research or in my master's classes said everything to the contrary. And she just kind of laughed and gave me a sad look. She said, "You'll start to understand soon enough that this district tends to have a knee-jerk reaction to things. In Creighton, everything is temporary, and if something doesn't work in less than a year and a half, we'll just toss it aside." I was just a new teacher, so rather than rocking the boat, I scrapped all my hard work from winter break and focused instead on trying to get my kids to pass tests, both of us resenting what the so-called education experts were doing to us. The only good thing about this experience was that it spurred me to action, where I felt too overwhelmed as a first-year teacher to even know what Creighton Education Association was, because in the Midwest, we just call them unions. You guys should start calling them unions. I joined shortly after the beginning of that second semester. When I heard about a longer day without pay, I went to the one-site meeting we were able to have before we knew exactly what was going on. And I attended the standing room only board meeting that week where stakeholder after stakeholder urged the board to say no to the longer school day, but the board voted yes anyway. I'm not bringing this up as an indictment of that board or that decision, and I'm certainly not here to open that wound, but that is an example of my early experience in CSD and how administrators and the board made decisions with little to no consideration of teacher voice. As a former CSD teacher, I can concur with what teachers say, like Mr. Diaz, that that Meet and Confer was a rubber stamp committee that essentially is attempted to placate teachers while running the agenda and determining the outcomes. I actually attended a Meet and Confer meeting as a silent member, and I encourage all of you to do that if you never have. And while I felt that the consensus procedure was promising, I could see how many votes were divided by admin and staff, and that other topics were essentially swept under the rug, regardless of how important they were to teachers and staff. We watched over the years as teachers left in droves, myself included, and how those who actually shared their main complaints with the district cited things like a lack of trust or autonomy, not being listened to, no open communication. But the good news is things have started to change in Creighton School District. CEA leadership has changed and seems to dramatically have improved communications and relations between our administrators and staff. Our administrators started listening because every good principal knows that you're only as good as your staff. And if you have to keep training new staff every year, you can't effectively run a school. Many of our principals took the results, computers. Many of our principals took the results of the numerous surveys we've given to them over the years to heart and have open communication, improved school culture, provided teachers with leadership opportunities, some where they even actually get paid, which is huge, and probably most importantly, worked willingly alongside teachers during the Meet and Confer process in an extraordinary collaborative way. It showed. And last February, when the then governing board was presented with the current policy for the third separate reading, we approved it unanimously with all 5 board members in attendance. What a momentous vote that was too, especially at a time when other districts, like Gilbert, were chipping away at the Meet and Confer process. Flagstaff came soon afterwards, and disastrous results followed with mass teacher exoduses. I truly felt that CSD was ready to be the flagship for other K-8 districts in the city, and what were then some very choppy waters. We knew our teachers were leaving in large numbers. We knew they were dissatisfied with the lack of voice and communication, and we took the lead in adopting some very progressive policy. There's been a movement in this country to demonize teachers in public schools, with everyone citing us as the problem, when those of us who actually work in schools every day know that systemic poverty, racism, and a broken justice system are really the blame. Today, we have an opportunity to continue to be the premier Central Phoenix school district that truly promotes a collaborative culture with its administrators, teachers, and classified staff. When I worked in Creighton District, we were known as the Band-Aid District or the Pendulum District. When I told folks that I worked in Creighton, they just gave me a sad little smile and would say things like, how can you keep up with all the constant changes? Or don't you get whiplash always trying to chase around that shiny magic bullet? And they thought it was really funny, but we're talking about kids and people's livelihoods here. The number one biggest predictor in a student's academic success beyond their parents' wealthy zip code is their teacher, and of course also the classified staff that supports them. It's taken us some time in CSD to fully understand just how important our teachers are, but we're getting there, and we're doing a heck of a lot better than most districts. Trust me, I'm looking for a job right now, and there are a frightening amount of teaching positions still available in the city in September. So please, let's not take a step backwards here. We've consulted with legal, we've received input from the AEA, and we still have every right to review what comes before us from Meet and Confer and line item veto if we don't feel comfortable with it. We did it with the shortened day, even though all stakeholders in that room reached consensus during Meet and Confer. I say we start to shake the pendulum image that we have and give this policy a chance to work before we send the message to our teachers and staff once again that we don't trust them.
consider comment?
Well, this is a fine mess, Ollie. I think for obvious reasons, I'm going to take a very neutral stance. I think it's really important that no matter what's decided tonight regarding suspension of policy, that you'll get my very best at inclusivity with stakeholders. You'll get my applause with seeking voice and advocacy from every stakeholder. And I will set up systems for you, no matter which policy is in place. I will set up systems for you to get the best advice we can get from a majority of various stakeholders. Now, that being said, there will be certain things that Meeting for can and can't do within the time frame, or within the money frame, or within the limitations that naturally come our way from legislature, or all the various complexities of problems we have to deal with. So no matter which way this board goes, I'm going to support you. What I don't want with all of my heart is for this to be a trust issue. And that's what it feels like right now. It feels like it's turned into mistrust of the past as a carry forward of mistrust for the future. And it doesn't matter which framework we use if we choose to trust and work and problem solve together. I will always advise a governing board in this role to listen to its attorneys. It feels to me like we heard two different things. I will always work to build trust with various stakeholders, including recognizing that 100% of what's been said tonight, I 100% agree with. Every single comment. This is not an either or way of thinking for me. If suspension of the policy is upheld or voted upon, you will get an operations team from me to work with people. You will get an advisory team from me to work with people. We will have issue-specific task force on instructional minutes, on special ed budgetary refinements, on prioritization of budgets. Those systems will be coming into place anyway. So the complexities of working conditions, I'll go to my grave working on it. I think the question is the board's desire for its role in this complex work. And I just want the board to know that I will work to advocate and support all employees, all stakeholders of our community, and I respectfully request a neutral position on it so that I can support whatever direction we go in wholeheartedly with my very best effort.
So, as board president, I reserve the right to have the last word. But I will just say, however the board goes, and what I heard is from James, and something I want us to consider is providing guidance. What is, like, how can the board move forward so that we have a trusting process? And I think we're kind of talking about the same thing, but we're talking past each other. And like, for example, I definitely want community input, but there are some issues that the general external stakeholders I feel should have an opportunity to weigh in on, but I don't think that's true for all the issues that come up through Meeting for. And what we have right now is no parameters on that, and we don't have clear guidance on what to do with that. So if we move forward with the policy, it doesn't fix it. So with that, I just say that however we go, we need to clarify these rules of engagement. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion. Before I do, I just want to say, Jeannie, I really agree with basically everything you said. I just feel like this policy is bad because we're voting no on what is brought to us. And it's my understanding that's not what we want to be doing. And so perhaps the board's not giving guidance that it should, but yeah, I have no idea how to do that differently either. So I want to fix it so that there isn't this ongoing problem. So I move that the governing board approve to suspend the current policy HB being confirmed.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
It's 3-2. Motion is passed. To split this agenda item, this is no one agenda item as presented here. is to give first read to, let's see here, it's HB and HC. And there are additional comments here, because this will come back in 2 weeks.
I think for sure we should fix the intent for the language because it refers to the superintendent as a man, so that's a problem. Perhaps we should try to, data.
Like I said, I'll do anything that you need.
So I'd like to propose that we at least change that or conduct the process himself. It's in the second paragraph.
There is a link under the agenda item that says background, and there's HB, which is our current one, it says previous policies, and that's what it's Oh, you're looking for that.
Second paragraph last word. Or conduct the process himself or herself.
So some direction is then to fix the language. I will offer that our policies, as a person on a policy making body, I like the policy to be simple. I like the regulation to give direction. I like there to be clear exhibits and rules and all that good stuff. So I would like superintendent to propose, if this is our policy, how are some of the other concerns addressed? Because I definitely am concerned that people will misconstrue our actions here, which is not to silence or censor dissent. It's actually, I still look forward to the comprehensive engagement framework for many more items that wouldn't fall into. So I want to give that direction. I know it's not a policy consideration, but it will make me feel, it will influence the way I vote on the policy adoption.
I would like for it to include some mention of a professional agreement. Is that possible?
It's definitely possible, and we can.
I mean, are we adding things to it right now at this moment, or are we just reverting back to this until we're ready to work on it again?
We're doing, right now, we have no policy.
This is our first
So our options are adopt this, adopt something different, work on this, have nothing. I think that's the worst case scenario.
In my opinion, other than the obvious that Jeannie brought out, in my opinion, other than the obvious himself that Jeannie brought out, I like things to be simple. Us as an entity, the board, I mean, it is the superintendent's duty. We direct the superintendent. If the superintendent does not, you can really take it because it's open and simple and really expand it to something fantastic. Or you can bring it in and you can be dictatorial and you can make it a horrible thing, as in Jeannie was talking about years past. And we as a board, when we evaluate the superintendent, should take into consideration how the meet and confer comes out. This way, we are giving the superintendent the option. We are either letting her blossom, Dr. Lewis who has recommendations of being, but it would be the board's duty to evaluate how this goes. But if we put too many little chinks into it, we are limiting what she can do in the future. And that's just my opinion.
Any further discussion?
I mean, I would like to, because we have to leave here with something tonight, because we certainly don't want to leave without any meet and confer policy. So, I mean, my suggestion would be to go with this, and then I guess go back to the drawing board. And my personal request as a board member would be, perhaps, like I said, we could go back and share this document with a committee or something like that, so they can actually see what was said when we first proposed these changes, so we're well within the legal ramifications. I would like to see a professional agreement included, because I know that is something that it strengthens the school district, does not weaken it. So, and I feel like my teachers, my colleagues feel the same way about this. So I personally feel like do away with the antiquated language, and maybe that's it. And then back to the drawing board with the committee who can redo all the stuff that they did with the last board, but then make it nice for the things that are concerning to people that have legal concerns. Does that
Yeah, we don't
sound
need
like
to
what other people want?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my concern with the professional agreement as it reads now is it's not clear to me what the consequences of not following it are. There's more than 1 year in there, which I appreciate having all that background information, but it's not stated as to what.
Well, there's no exhibit is adopted by the board, and the one we looked at as a potential compromise was rejected. So I mean, we cannot take action on this. This is first read. It's just our opportunity to share our points of view. With the director to clean this up.
Yeah,
But
do the first read just without himself.
sure. And if we to move this forward, I think that would be a different agenda item. I mean, or we reject it, but I think we don't want to walk away with nothing. So in 2 weeks, we would come back and look at something here amended. And it sounds like if we just fix the language there, that might be a possible bridge to then address the engagement pieces that we care about. We want to make sure our stakeholders, especially our staff, have clear ideas on what those rules are. That might not look like a policy though. That might just look like a process that goes with it, or a regulation or exhibit, but we can definitely work with the superintendent on that.
I have a question. I just got the paperwork on what we're looking at because nothing's on my board docs at all. There's no links to any kind of documents. But so we just suspended meet and confer. So how can we talking about the scope of meet and confer is suspended? Are we trying to now bring up adopt a new meet and confer?
So I split the items, we suspended it's now the old policy. I guess it's the current policy. We suspended the current policy, and their proposal is to have a policy change.
Their proposal?
It's not their proposal, it's a proposal.
Oh, okay.
So it was our former document. So yes, we suspended the current policy. We're looking at adopting a new one in a more simplistic language. On first read, we can only discuss
So
it.
had we not suspended the previous policy or the current policy, this one would be a discussion.
It could still be a discussion. It just is a matter of if we don't adopt anything, we don't, my concern was, I don't want to start a process that we as a governing board and we couldn't reach consensus on. We're not even consensus, we couldn't get a majority as is. So we want to make sure we have something, but I also want to address the concerns and put them in the right process.
So having said that, I'm seeing that this scope of meet and convert on page 101, page 1150 says, it shall include wages, salaries, salary schedules, hours of work, compensations relating to fringe benefits, and conditions of work that are non-instructional in nature and of district-wide impact. So hours of work, that would be included in time.
That is on this.
Time of day. So,
Well, I think that's how you interpret it, but
because you can't really say, well,
no, I actually,
yeah.
I actually don't, I disagree. I mean, if our school day was 5 hours and teachers work 2.5 hours, that might mean we have 2 teachers to fill the full day. So I don't necessarily agree.
Okay, but it can't
that
work
it's
the
on
other way. We can't have a,
which is
can't-
governed by a different policy that puts the firm ownership of that with the superintendent.
well, I mean, if the meet and confer came up with, okay, instructors will teach for a total of 6 hours a day, and then, but we have 7 hours of actually in-class teaching, then it doesn't quite work.
Well, not necessarily. Like there might have to be, how are those students addressed for those other hours? It might be a different start time for teachers. there are different ways to address it, but it's not about the actual length of the instructional minutes, which is governed by a different policy.
Well, the length of the school day,
These
because
are work
instructional
hours.
minutes would be when they're actually with the teacher. Yeah. Okay.
And again, like, these are the things that we want to work out, and like, what are the rules, and what is that process, and what guidance does our board give when we do the process? So we don't waste anyone's time. Okay. I think there's a lot to work on for 2 weeks.
I don't have anything else to do. So here, I'm gonna summarize what I heard. I heard to, bring back, after, this is considered the first read, the comments made center around the gender comments, and to bring it back for second read as it reads. I also heard that you wanna work on, procedures, a comprehensive engagement approach, perhaps regulations and exhibits that may mirror some of the things we feel like we're losing or shifting upon with this change in policy. Did I capture it right?
Yeah, I mean, we're still going to be bringing back a meeting confer policy. We just don't know what it looks like yet.
This is a first read of that policy you're bringing back.
But we can add to it or take away or whatever.
We can do that at any time.
Yeah, so we can, that's what I'm trying to be sure we're saying the same thing. So bringing back this one with the gender shift is the one comment I heard as a clear, keep it as it is. Unless you want to have somebody work on it in between to tighten, loosen components of it for a second read. And we can bring it back for second read and approval is what you typically do 2 weeks from now, but that's for the board's discretion.
I mean, I'd like to see the same work that happened in 2013 and 2014, you know, where we did include the lawyer's language. And then whatever may satisfy, you know, Ms. Sheffrey, Ms. Young, and Mr. Zaragoza, bring that in as well. But I don't think that it's wise for us to, again, like Mr. Diaz said, take 2 steps backwards. It's sending a message. They just did away with meet and confer under similar circumstances in Flagstaff. They don't have one now, as far as I know. And that's, my parents were union members. This is a protection of our rights, which we have so little of in the state.
So it sounds like we are looking at this as a potential policy, and we always, of course, exercise the right to continue to change that. I wouldn't say every 2 weeks, but every 4. But we wouldn't do it, you know, I think if we put in the right pieces, we engage folks, and we lined it all up, it should be an easy revision if these so choose to go there, if we still feel that's necessary.
I don't know why I seem to be filling out more yellow cards this year, but I would like to look at, you know, my idea is what Dr. Lewis says with the gender shift in 2 weeks, but I'd like to look at this whole meet and confer process during our winter study session and really see it, look at things and try to get things going and make that an agenda item. So I don't want to drop into.
Okay. So,
Okay, there's a yellow card.
But doesn't, the meet and confer process usually start in November?
yeah, but if it takes us time, that's why we were.
Well, they
So
would
we'll
be under the old one, and we can see how how the process is going. Dr. Lewis could,
How come they be on the new ones? Right now, we have no
Right
meet,
now, there's not.
we have no meet and confer policy right now.
but if this is the first reading, and we adapt the older one, they would start under that. And by
Do you mean the one we just? The first read, the one we're on first read.
read, we would adopt that, the generic one. And so that would be in process. And you know, we could take input from people and Dr. Lewis, because she would be in the middle of it, and the group would be in the middle of it, she give some recommendations. You know, what's going good, what is really not going good. And you could take, we had more informed decision-making process at that time.
Well, and I don't want to hold up problem-solving processes as if that's the only venue where they could occur. So in the meantime, no matter where we go, I'm gonna work up some problem-solving processes and venues, you know, for that are issue-specific or task force-oriented. So that's still gonna happen. But I don't know if you wanna, how long you wanna go without a meeting for policy.
Yeah, I'd rather have something. work
Well,
on
that's why I was
the
saying second
pieces.
reading, the adoption, maybe it's.
Right, so if we have the second read at the next meeting and approve this, then at least we have something. In the meantime, a committee or whomever
However we do it,
Yeah.
as we can find it, and,
can be working on something that's more acceptable to everyone.
That's good. We'll figure it out. With that, our next agenda item is discussion and possible motion on the impasse between state legislature and the Educational Association lawsuit to adequately fund schools. I brought this as a placeholder, so in case anyone was sleeping, the lawsuit to, we're not getting the money that the voters said we should be getting for schools. There was a negotiation in the courts that failed. And so now it looks like the legislature owes public education something like $1 billion more. I didn't have language here. I had asked ASBA to provide some. I know other school districts and governing boards have looked at making a statement. I brought this up because in the spring we made two statements, one on desegregation funding, the other one on the governor's budget proposal. But I'd love to ask you all your thoughts. If you would like us to make a statement, we can pull that language together and have it on our approval next week, or sorry, in 2 weeks, and then hopefully release it to the media or someone.
It'd be great to go after what
Okay.
I caught snippets with the governor being somewhat bushwhacking the question, and his answer was, we'll see what the legislature does with the land trust, statement of trust. Is that even coming up? What type of time frame are we looking at? It's not good. I mean, to know the school district is good. We are so far behind with, I mean, if you look in the enrollments and all this other good stuff, where we're at now is where we were in the 90s. And during that time, school districts were rolling along with they could provide for their students. And now we're pinching pennies. I agree that we should do something, but I don't want to start it and then get, whacked out in the knees because something went through the legislature.
Yeah, well, the good news is other districts have already issued statements. The challenge, of course, is the governor has some ideas, Republican leadership at the legislature have different ideas. No one's on the same page. I don't personally know that there's relief in sight, but I definitely want us to be on record because, I know all the work we put forward to pass an override, 60% of that went to teacher salaries this year. We'd love to be able to continue to do that, and we can't do that without the money. So I definitely want us to take some action. We're not out there on a limb all alone. I think it was Linda who already took action. So there are others out there. We can look at that. We can model it off of what we did with the governor's budget proposal, and hopefully.
I don't like being out.
Okay.
Oh,
I think that's new for this board, though. In the past, we had an aversion. I know it wasn't us five, but previous boards I sat on here had a stronger version of being on that one. Good.
Yeah, I think that, there's just for clarity, because I think there's a, just to be sure we know what we're saying. AEA, ASBA, and ASBO all teamed up to sue the state for funds that, because the inflation rate, as a constitutional right, was not kept up with. And the legislature lost that in courts. And the judge said, go in a room and figure it out. And that's where the impasse occurred. And on an editorial note, the shell game that I think is being played with kick the can and postponement of funding through state land and 20 million in the next 10 decades.
Still from the Constitution, they approved
Preschool.
First things first, and maybe move that money.
Yeah, I mean, I really feel their pain, and we all do. But there is also a known surplus in the legislature right now, based on not only as a rainy day fund. I think it's raining. Last night was an indication. And so, you know, there's a rainy day fund, and there's a surplus based on an improved economy, and it's not being deliberately earmarked. So if this board chooses to be continuously courageous and aggressive about making a stand, there's a couple of statements out there that I think you could sign off on and then decide in what way you wanted to communicate that, or deliberately to the people that you want to let know how you feel.
Future agenda items, we already discussed a few of them. Any others? Awesome. 7:40, I move to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned.